Two innocent children were left abandoned with blankets over their heads, hidden from a cruel world and a dark secret no one dared to speak of. The cruel foster parent who tried to silence them became the shadow that haunted their fragile lives, stirring anger and outrage. But Ellen Harris, a lonely widow with a heart full of unexpected courage, made a forbidden choice that changed everything. Just wait until you hear how the truth finally came to light, and why justice, in the end, triumphed over darkness. In the quiet town of Woodstock, Wisconsin, Ellen Harris lived a life wrapped in solitude. In her early 50s, she was a widow who had carried the weight of loss quietly for years. Her husband had died in a car accident long ago, leaving her alone in a weathered old house on the edge of town. The walls of that house held memories, faded photographs, untouched belongings, and the silence of a home once filled with laughter. Ellen had never had children of her own. Over time, she had come to believe that part of her life story was closed. Everyday tasks had become her routine, simple errands that connected her to the world outside her solitude. On this particular autumn afternoon, Ellen was returning from the local market, the chill in the air whispering that winter was near. As she walked down the familiar road that led past the railroad crossing, something caught her eye, a strange, almost haunting sight. There, sitting on the cold, hard ground, were two small figures, a boy and a girl no more than 7 or 8 years old. Huddled together, their heads were hidden beneath threadbare blankets, the fabric pulled low, obscuring their faces. The wind tugged gently at the edges of the blankets, but the children did not move much. Their tiny bodies trembled, not just from the cold, but something deeper, something unspoken. Around them, the street was deserted. No cars passed. No people hurried by. The silence seemed to wrap around the scene like a heavy veil. At the children's feet lay a simple, handwritten cardboard sign that read, "For adoption. Please help." Ellen stopped in her tracks. Her heart clenched tight. She felt a sudden, overwhelming mixture of emotions. Compassion, fear, confusion. Why had these children been left here, alone and hidden? Why cover their heads with blankets, shielding their faces from the world? And most haunting of all, why was there no one else to care? No one searching for them? Her mind raced. The situation felt desperate, almost forbidden, as if she had stumbled upon something she wasn't meant to see. The urge to look away warred against a stronger, quieter voice inside her, a voice that urged her to act. Despite the shadows of loneliness that had settled in her own life, Ellen could not leave those children behind. Something about them stirred a hope she thought she had lost. Carefully she approached, her voice soft and gentle as she spoke, trying to offer comfort without startling them. No answers came, only quiet sobs muffled beneath the blankets. Ellen knew then that this was no ordinary moment, and that whatever their story was, it was wrapped in secrets waiting to be uncovered. Ellen carefully brought the two children back to her modest home, a place that had long been quiet and empty. She wrapped them in warm blankets, fed them whatever simple meals she could prepare, and watched over them with a cautious hope. For hours she sat nearby, her eyes searching for any sign that the children might trust her enough to speak. But the silence between them remained thick, like a fragile glass wall neither dared to break. The following morning, sunlight filtered gently through the curtains as Ellen prepared breakfast. The little boy had fallen asleep quietly on the sofa, but the girl remained seated on the worn armchair, her small frame curled inward like a fragile bird. She didn't say much, just a few hesitant glances in Ellen's direction. Then, without warning, as Ellen reached out to offer a plate of pancakes, the girl's soft voice cut through the stillness. "Mother." The single word hung in the air, fragile and powerful, and tears welled up in her wide eyes. Ellen's breath caught. The weight of that one whispered word struck her deeper than she expected. It shattered the fragile calm that had settled over the room. It was a shock that rattled her to her core. These children were not simply lost or abandoned. They were hiding something, or someone was hiding them. Ellen's mind raced with questions and fears. Could these two be escaping from danger? Were they victims of a painful past too heavy to carry? And if so, what kind of peril still lurked nearby? A cold grip of fear tightened around Ellen's heart, but alongside that fear, a quiet but fierce resolve began to grow. How could she send them away now? They had nowhere else to turn. And somehow, her own loneliness and the years of loss whispered that maybe this was her chance for a new beginning, for a family she had never dared to hope for. The truth, heavy and tragic, settled over Ellen like a storm cloud. These orphans carried wounds no one could see, burdens that had forced them into hiding beneath those blankets. Her decision to bring them into her home was no longer just an act of kindness. It was a forbidden choice, one that held consequences far beyond what she had imagined. Consequences that might change her life forever and perhaps break her in ways she was not yet ready to face. Weeks slipped quietly by, and Ellen found herself stepping into a role she had never imagined, that of a mother. She learned the rhythms of caring for the children, soothing their restless nights, sharing small moments of laughter, and slowly earning their trust. Her days, once defined by solitude, became filled with the subtle chaos and warmth that only children could bring. Yet beneath the fragile happiness, a persistent shadow gnawed at her heart. Guilt. It came in waves, for not knowing the full story behind these children's arrival, for the nagging fear that she was sheltering them from dangers she could barely understand, and for the unsettling thought that maybe she had been deceived. What if her kindness had placed them in greater peril? What if by trying to save them, she was doing the opposite? Just as these doubts grew too heavy to bear, an unexpected visitor came to Woodstock, a man named Jackson Myers. He was a private investigator with a stern demeanor and eyes that held the weight of someone who had seen too much sorrow. Jackson claimed he was searching for two children who had disappeared from a neighboring state, a case that had haunted him for months. His arrival shattered the fragile peace. Jackson demanded the children be returned immediately, accusing Ellen of kidnapping, words that cut deeper than any knife. The town whispered, suspicion growing like wildfire, and Ellen felt the walls closing in around her. The conflict reached a tense peak. Ellen's fear of losing the children, the only family she had ever known, collided with the undeniable reality that the situation was far more complicated than she had imagined. Every moment became a battle, between heart and conscience. Yet beneath Jackson's tough exterior, Ellen sensed a fragile humanity. She glimpsed a man burdened by his own losses, a father who had once held on to hope, only to watch it slip away. His relentless pursuit was not born of cruelty, but of a desperate longing for justice and reunion. In this unlikely meeting, a silent understanding began to take shape. Two broken souls, each wrestling with painful pasts, bound by a shared desire to protect those children, but divided by the uncertain path forward. At last, the painful mystery unraveled. The children had been rescued from a cruel foster home where their caretaker had hidden dark secrets, trying desperately to keep them silent and unseen. The blankets draped over their heads were not just shields against the cold. They were fragile veils to protect their fragile spirits from a world that had brought them so much hurt. With Jackson's tireless help and determination, justice was finally served. The wrongdoer was held accountable, and the children's safety was no longer in question. The weight that had hung over the small town of Woodstock began to lift, replaced by a cautious but growing hope. But for Ellen, the real victory was something deeper and more profound. She became their mother, not through legal papers or formal titles, but through the boundless love she gave them every day. The moment the little girl spoke the word mother aloud for the first time was a turning point. It broke through every fear, every shadow of doubt, and filled Ellen's heart with a joy she had never known. The town, once quiet and reserved, opened its arms to Ellen and the children. Neighbors, once distant, now smiled knowingly and offered support. Together, they formed a new family, one not born from blood, but from courage, compassion, and choice. Their story spread quietly but powerfully, inspiring others to believe that even the darkest secrets can be overcome by love. It was a testament to the strength found in kindness, the hope born from healing, and the courage to choose a new path forward. In the end, Ellen and her two children were not just survivors. They were a living reminder that family is made in the heart, and that compassion can light the way through the darkest nights.